بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد. Forgive me, I have a bit of a itchy throat today, so you might hear me coughing a little bit. But as for last week, we've spoken about the dream of the king, and in his dream, he had saw 7 fat cows being eaten and devoured by 7 skinny cows, and then he sees sumbulat. Sumbulat are like grains, right? He sees 7 green grains, and then he sees other 7 dry grains, and then he is meeting amongst his chairman, so to speak, right? He is meeting amongst his advisors and chieftains, asking them for their interpretations of the dream. He's seeking the interpretation of his dream. And in the beginning of the ayah, he says, Inni arani. Inni arani. And this is ayah number 43. Inni arani suggests as if he is seeing this dream on a constant basis, or this dream is significant to the king, right? So when you see something so, especially a dream, if you see it so consistently, it tends to bear meaning. And if it doesn't bear meaning, it's striking to that person, right? Why do I keep seeing this dream? What's with this dream that is so significant that I keep seeing it, right? So in the next ayah, we've covered this ayah last week. However, I wanted to revisit the ayats because there are a few things that I want to mention. So he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in ayah number 44, he says, قَالُوا أَضْغَاثُ أَحْلَامٍ. They responded, the chieftains or the advisors, they responded to the king and they say that these are just adghath, like ahlam. Ahlam is the dreams that he's seeing. Adghath it comes from the word daghath in Arabic. So the word daghath are things that you put together, right? And you mix it like all in one. For example, like you have a bag, right? And you're just taking things and you're just putting it in there. Now it's mixed up. It's like you don't know. You're confused, right? In this case, they're pretty much saying like cows, fat, skinny. Now you're talking about grains, and then 7 of them. It's just another word for it is like mumbo jumbo things, right? It's not. You're just seeing random things that are mixed up, right? Adghath. It's just you're seeing that something that's insignificant. Don't worry about it. It's pretty much what they're saying, right? So adghathu ahlam. وَمَا نَحْنُ بِتَأْوِيلِ أَحْلَامِ بِعَالِمِينَ. And we don't know such interpretations of meaningless things, right? We don't know the term interpretation of this. It doesn't mean anything, right? So this is a response. This is the response of the advisors of the king, right? Clearly, it shows that the people that the king are surrounded by are people of I wouldn't want to say like they are unknowledgeable of things that in this case Yusuf alayhi salam had knowledge of, right? So this is another factor to mention that Yusuf alayhi salam, he was one amongst the entire population of Egypt who was given knowledge. And not just knowledge of just dreams, but people around him and the people who met him saw him as such who had significant knowledge And a person who holds knowledge, who has true knowledge, they carry themselves in such a manner that people can see a difference in their character, right? People with true knowledge, when they carry themselves in the way they walk, or even in their speech, or even if, just looking at their faces, human beings, we tend to see people of knowledge with such at awe, with great character, right? And this holds true because every single time somebody meets Yusuf alayhi salam, it's they have something to say about him, or in the case of the Aziz, for example, he says, this child, either he's going to help us, as a servant, as a slave, or we can even take him as our own child, our own son, because they see something in him. He's not a regular person, right? And in the case of the two men the two young men who went with him in the prison, they themselves, we see something in you, so much so that please, tell us the meaning of our dream. We're all ears for you. Our ears are open. Our attention is on you, right? And we will see, continuing on in the story, that indeed even the king himself, when he first met Yusuf alayhi salam, he gives him something that is above all of his advisors. And we will get to that, inshallah. So I wanted to explain the difference between, now, if we talk about dreams, right, when we're talking about ahlam, it can go on for days. It's a subject in which many people are very interested in. It's a subject where it'll keep you up at night due to interest. You're so deep into the subject that is, you would rather stay up to hear it, right? That and talking about jinns, for example, those two topics, people will stay up at night, right? So I don't want to get into it too in depth, and I don't feel like I have such knowledge to do so. So I'll just mention a few points with ahlam. So ahlam here. Now I mentioned something earlier in the class where there are repetitive themes in the story where Allah strategically, the way he tells the story, he puts things in certain areas where if you really analyze a story, you start to remember kind of connections between, earlier part of the story and later part of the story. The way Allah tells the story is so amazing, where it captures your attention, not in just the beginning. You know how they have stories where they call it what is it called? When you're telling a story and when you're writing a story, you want to make sure that the beginning part of the story catches your audience attention. There's a term for it, I forget what it was, right? But in the case of Yusuf, the story of Yusuf, it's scattered all over the story, right? It's so amazing. Now, the word ahlam, Allah refers to the ahlam of the king as a dream. Now, it's different from the dream of Yusuf alayhi salam. Does anybody here knows the word that Allah uses referring to the dream of Yusuf? Ru'ya or ru'a, right? It means the same thing. Ru'a and ahlam means dream. There are differences in the two words though, right? Some of the scholars mention that ru'a or ru'ya is a dream in which Allah reveals a sign to his prophets. Now, ru'ya is something that is, it is in itself, it is clear, as if it's like a bayan, like it's informing you of something, right? It is also something that brings you closer to Allah. Now, if you have a dream that's striking, right, it's something like, for example, a nightmare, and it's so clear, but at the end of that dream, you wake up and you're consumed by it, you're thinking about it. If that dream doesn't bring you close to Allah, don't mind it. Now, I don't want to speak too much about dreams because it goes into a lot of like details where I don't feel like it's befitting for me to speak of. I think like someone who knows more, like Sheikh Abdul Bari, can speak more about it. But in the case of ru'ya, it's something for Allah sending down like a sign. In this case, Yusuf alayhi salam, it is a means of revealing the proof of Allah, not just to Yusuf alayhi salam, but to who else? To Yaqub, right? Because Yaqub alayhi salam, he translated that dream, correct? In the case of ahlam is used or is meant for it's more for nightmares, so to speak, right? In English, we don't have, like, it's actually amazing because English is the most kind of like used language currently, right? And even in English, it lacks vocabulary to explain Arabic, yeah, right? It's quite fascinating. Now, ahlam, another word for it is like light nightmares or just kind of like dreams, right? If you ever had dreams before, in dreams in which, like, you know, like you have a dream of you know, let's just say basketball shoes, right? And then in that area or in that time of your life, you know, maybe you're selling basketball shoes. Right? I'm saying this because I actually sold basketball shoes for a friend of mine when I came back from Saudi Arabia, you know. And so another thing is, like, for example, when I was learning Arabic for the first 2 years, I just recently had a conversation with a younger person who just came back yesterday from Egypt, and he went there specifically to learn Arabic, right? He mentioned to me, he says, I actually started, when I learned Arabic, I actually started to dream in Arabic. Like in the speech in his dream, he's speaking Arabic in his dream. And I told him, you know, the first 2 years in my studies in Saudi Arabia, I had the same the same kind of like sequence, right? It's just I started to have dreams in Arabic, right? And it's just because in your daily life, your thoughts, you know, your what's it called, your wahm, or your interest or the things that you do in life affects your ahlam, right? So you start dreaming of these things. Now it's interesting because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He specifically used ru'ya for Yusuf, and in the case of the king, He calls it ahlam, right? In ayah number 45, it says, وَقَالَ الَّذِي نَجَا مِنْهُمَا وَادَّكَرَ بَعْدَ أُمَّةٍ أَنَا أُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِتَأْوِيلِهِ فَأَرْسِلُونَ. Now, we mentioned in that meeting, there is that person, نَجَّا مِنْهُمَا, the one that was saved from the two. Who's the two again? The two that entered the prison with Yusuf alayhi salam. Remember, one of them was crucified, Right? He was punished for what he did. The other one was saved, najja. In the case of this ayah, وَقَالَ الَّذِي نَجَا مِنْهُمَا, the one who was saved from the two, وَادَّكَرَ بَعْدَ أُمَّةٍ, remembered after a period of time. He remembered of the conversation that he had with Yusuf. So remember Yusuf, he told him, he says, when you go back to your king, recognize my name to your king. Like, mention me and my situation to your king so that he can look into my case. Because he's saying that I'm not even supposed to be in prison. So if you can try to get the king to look into my case so that he can free me from prison. He forgot when he left. And now after a long period of time, some scholars actually said that this was like about 7 years afterwards, right? And this is just of course it's speculation, right? But it's not, some of the scholars, they just mentioned, like, I don't know how they got it, but they mentioned that it could be more or it could be less, right? Now he remembered after a time. Now the time here is the word time here is ummah. Ana unabbi'ukum bita'wilihi. He says to the king, right? He's in the vicinity of the meeting. Because why? He's the one that is pouring wine to the ministers, right? The advisors, right? Obviously, when you have people who are higher up, they don't pour their own wine. They have their servants to do it for them. He is in that meeting and he's hearing all of this. And after the meeting, he says, I can tell you the dream of the meaning of your dream, right? So for arsilun, so send me away, or send me, let me go, so I can come back and tell you the meaning of the dream, right? Now, it's interesting here because he used the word nabba'a, or Surah Naba, right? Like to inform, right? Nabba'a, there is another word that is used in the surah as well, to kind of like explain a dream or to interpret a dream. One of them is to nabba or nabba'a, to inform of a dream. Now, when you're informing something or when you're telling someone something, you would go somewhere to take that information and you would inform other people, right? Nabba'a, right? The other word that's used is it's not coming to mind right now, but in the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, when he says ana unabbi'ukum bita'wilihi, he is saying here, now this gives you a sense of how Yusuf alayhi salam is, right? Remember I told you guys to when we are taking this class, I want us to focus on the fact that we can't meet Yusuf alayhi salam ourselves. We can at least understand his words and his responses to get to know him in a different way by reading, right? Or getting to know Yusuf alayhi salam personally through his responses and through his words. Yusuf alayhi salam here, he says, Ana unabbi'ukum bita'wilihi. He says, I will inform you. The other word I just remembered is aftuni, or fatwa, right? Fatwa is coming from yourself, right? You ever heard of the word, the fatwa of the ulama? The scholars, they give fatwa, meaning they have the knowledge. They have the knowledge and they will inform you of the meaning of the knowledge from their own self, because it comes from them. This is fatwa, right? So when they're saying aftuni, the two men, they are saying aftuni, right? They're saying, give us the meaning of this dream. Yusuf alayhi salam, instead he says unabbi'ukum, meaning that the knowledge that the explanation of the dream that I'm going to give you is not for myself. In fact, this knowledge is this knowledge doesn't come from myself. This knowledge doesn't come from myself, rather is coming from somebody who taught me. Jazakallah khair. Barakallahu feek. So Yusuf alayhi salam, in his words, he is so careful with how he speaks. He is conscious of Allah with every single word he uses. This is the level of taqwa, of consciousness of Allah that Yusuf alayhi salam had. That even within his knowledge, he doesn't apply it, he doesn't associate it with himself. That he is actually yunabbit, that he is taking this knowledge from somewhere else, a different source, and from that source, I can explain it. This is nabba'a, right? So in the case of the wine bearer, he says, "Unabbi'ukum," I will go and find the answer, or derive the explanation. I'll give it to you. So send me away, so I can give it to you. The next ayah number 46. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Yusufu ayyuha siddiq." Oh, I'm sorry. There is something that I left out. Oh, sorry, no, sorry. Ayah number 46. Yusufu ayyuha siddiq aftina. Right, we hear the word again. Aftina. To give us your fatwa. في سبع بقرات سمان يأكلهن سبع إجاف وسبع سنبلات خضر وأخرى يابسات لعلي أرجع إلى الناس لعلهم يعلمون. Now, he goes to Yusuf, that the person, right? He goes to Yusuf. He says, "Oh Yusuf, the ayyuha siddiq, the man of truth," right? Siddiq was a name that was given to whom? Abu Bakr. Because if we study his life, indeed, he holds true to that name, right? Now, if we know how Abu Bakr was, this person goes to Yusuf and he calls him by this name, Ayyuha Siddiq. This was the image that he had of Yusuf during that time. A person with honor, a person who held the truth no matter what, right? Ayyuha Siddiq aftina. Give us the understanding, or give us the fatwa of this. And he explains the dream. The seven cows, the seven fat cows, eating it are seven skinny cows. And then you have the seven green grains, and then afterwards is the seven dried up, shriveled, grains, right? لَعَلِّي أَرْجِعْ, so that I may return, once you give me the understanding, I can return to the people. النَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. So I can tell them about this dream, the meaning of this dream. Right? Now Yusuf alayhi salam, he responds and he says, in ayah number 47, immediately he says, قَالَ تَزْرَعُونَ سَبْعٌ سِنِينَ دَأَبًا فَمَا حَصَدتُّمْ فَذَرُوهُ في سنبله إلا قليلا مما تأكلون. He says, now look at this advice. He tells them, he says, قال تزرعون سبع سنين. He says, you When he's talking, he says, تزرعون. He used the plural form. He says, you all will go and plant and farm crops and grains and your farms for 7 consecutive years. فما حصدتم فذروه في سنبله, and then you will, how do I explain this? فما حصدتم, so excuse me, let me pull up the explanation. Okay, so فَمَا حَصَدتُّمْ فَذَرُوهُ فِي سُنبُلِهِ. I'm not sure what that means, actually. I don't know. I don't want to give the wrong meaning. So I will try to come back to it next week, inshallah. Unless somebody else knows what the meaning is.
Whatever you harvest.
فَمَا حَصَدتُّمْ فَذَرُوهُ.
Leave it on it is.
I'm sorry?
Leave it is grain. Not.
No, hasada means when we cut the harvest.
Whatever you harvest.
فَمَا حَصَدتُّم.
Yeah, when we cut.
ما الذي أخذ يعني؟
Yeah.
أيوة.
Leave it.
فَذَرُوهُ.
Leave it in the spike.
On this.
خلاص. So حصد or حصد or حصدتم means whatever you harvest, whatever you gather from your farm. فَذَرُوهُ. Leave as much as you can. في سنبله إلا قليلا ما تأكلون مما تأكلون. Leave as much as you can, except take little from what you need.
Absolutely.
Right? So, jazakallah khair. Take from whatever harvest that you can take. Leave as much as you can leave, and only take from it with what you need. Right? ثم يأتي من بعده. Okay, so and then he continues. Yusuf alayhi salam says, ثم يأتي من بعد ذلك سبع شداد يأكلهن ما قدمتم لهن إلا قليلا ما تحسنون. Yusuf alayhi salam says, after those 7 years that you guys harvest, after those 7 years will come 7 years of difficulty. Shidad, meaning like very, very difficult times. Referring to a drought, right? يَأْكُلُهُنَّ مَا قَدَمْتُمْ. And in those 7 years, will kind of, يَأْكُل means like to eat, but it will consume what you've harvested. What you've harvested, it will consume it, right? مَا قَدَمْتُمْ لَهُنَّ. It will consume what you harvest from the past 7 years. إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مَا تُحْسِنُونَ. Except from what little you store. So, within those 7 years of difficulty, the little that you store will be enough for you, and is mentioned that is only a little bit. The rest of what you harvest will be consumed because of the shidad, right? Because of the difficulty of the drought. And then he continues to say in ayah number 49, he says, ثُمَّ يَأْتِي مِن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ عَامٌ فِيهِ يُغَاثُ النَّاسِ وَفِيهِ يَعْصِرُونَ. Now it's amazing because nowhere in the dream speaks about what he is mentioning now. He says, and after those 7 plus 7 is 14. The 15th year after everything, min ba'di dhalik, after that, عام, there will come a year after that. فيه يغاث الناس. Within it, you will receive yugath or ghaith is plentiful rain or abundance of rain. A rain in which it is a blessing that comes with it. Ghaith. Right? Now we know that there's rain that comes with punishment. We know that there's rain that is just, it has little to no effect to the land, right? And we know that there are rain that comes with blessings. Right? And like recently in Saudi Arabia, we know that, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, where there was rain for about, I think it was 3 days straight. And what came with it? Now, I've been to Saudi Arabia, and there were many times that there were rains, like there was rain and rain and rain, to the point where, so the rain in Saudi Arabia is very different, right? When it rains, it hits you hard, right? The raindrops are actually really big. It's like a tropical type of rain, whereas it's not like here, right? The raindrops are actually really small. The raindrops in Saudi Arabia are huge. I don't know why, but when it hits you, you feel it, right? I've been there for about 7 years? Not once. At the time span I've been there, and I've spoken to my sheikh, and my sheikh mentioned that he's been there longer than me. And he's been there since the late 1990s. So since that time, until when I left, or even until now, after it rains, in the desert, it doesn't change the color of the desert. It's still sand. It's still brown. But the past 3 weeks, it just rained for 3 days, and it changed the whole landscape. Completely green. SubhanAllah. Anamat sa. Right? So I don't know if it's ghaith, I don't know if it's like bushra, I don't know. But in the case of ghaith, is abundance of rain, right? And Yusuf alayhi salam says that in that 15th year, there will be ghaith for the people. And then in that year, he says, you will squeeze grapes. What does that mean? What does it mean when he says, وَيَعْصِرُونَ?
A lot of crop. A lot of
Meaning, there are so much fruits from the rain, it'll be so plentiful that even grapes will grow. Now, if you ever visit a grape farm, you ask them, how much amounts of water do you use? They'll look at you like, don't even ask me. Because to farm grapes, it takes a large amount of water, right? It takes a large amount of water. Now, what are we talking about? The ghaith from Allah. So much so that on the 15th year, you will have an abundance of rain, so much so that it will help you produce grapes in your farmland. Right? Where in the dream does it says that? Nowhere. And Yusuf alayhi salam, he added that. This is knowledge that Allah has given him. Don't get me wrong, Yusuf alayhi salam will figure out later part in the story that he is somebody very intelligent. Very intelligent. I will prove it, inshallah, in the upcoming classes, that there are verbiage and events and happenings further on in the story that tells you, or that explains that Yusuf alayhi salam, in such a short amount of time, he's able to plan something, to plan such an elaborate, I don't want to say scheme, because it seems scheme is like kind of like an evil, notion to it, right? It's a plan that is so elaborate that he in a short amount of time he was able to plan for that plan, right? Yusuf alayhi salam, no matter how intelligent he was or he is, he never ever once associated with himself, right? He says, "Unabbi'ukum," I will explain to you, I will inform you, but from a source other than I. Now, I wanted to stop here. I want to stop here and speak about Yusuf alayhi salam. One of my main goals for this class, well, there's several goals in this class, but two of my main goals in this class is to try my best to explain what Allah has given me as understanding, how I understand my Lord, and how I understand my Prophet. The two things is knowing Allah and getting closer to Him through this story, and knowing Yusuf alayhi salam and getting to know him through the story. Because by reading the story and studying the story, what it did for me was that it brought me closer to my Lord. What it did for me is I understood who Allah truly was, even though I loved Him regardless. I understood His names. I understood what He did for Yusuf alayhi salam. And I understand His power over our life, just how His power and His sultan, right? Sulta, or His, remember we just mentioned Wahidul Qahhar. He is the one, the true power over our lives, just as he was with Yusuf alayhi salam. Yusuf alayhi salam, what did he ask the wine bearer? What did he request from him? The one thing that he requested in this entire story, he only requested help one time, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. He requested help from the wine bearer to go and talk to the king about his case, his situation, right? When he had an opportunity coming to him, rather than taking that opportunity, and the opportunity is, he could have easily told the wine bearer, I won't give you the answer. I won't interpret this dream for you until you go back to your king and talk to him about my case. You know, what's wrong with you? I told you this years ago, and you forgot? Now that you remember, not until you tell him, I can explain the dream to you. If you want this from me, do something for me. Right? Now this is Yusuf. This is Yusuf. Yusuf alayhi salam, he understood the dream. He understood the urgency of this dream. And he said, he explained the dream immediately with being selfless, not thinking of himself. He says, the people has to know the meaning of the dream so that they can start saving the harvest now. They can start now. They don't have to wait for me to, go to a hearing, and how long, even till today, if we go to a court case, it can take years. It can take a long, long time for a judge to wait for it, and they get the jury involved, and maybe they have a second hearing, for example, if they can't, they can't come to a conclusion for the case. It's like, okay, we'll convene at a later time. And what's the later time? We don't know. Maybe another year, right? Instead of waiting for Yusuf alayhi salam to be freed, he says, you know what? The people are more important. This drought that's coming is so shidad, is so difficult that I have to tell them. I can't think about myself right now. Right? Yusuf alayhi salam, this was the type of person he was. He was selfless. Even though he knew that he can possibly stay in prison for the rest of his life, he says, I have to tell the people. This is knowledge that is given to me by Allah. I have to tell the people. I can't keep it to myself. I can't be selfish. And in fact, this part of the story of Yusuf alayhi salam pushed me to teach this class. Because I said to myself, how selfish are you, O Muhammad, that Allah has taught you this story, even though you're not a sheikh, even though you're not, this or that. Allah has taught you this story. Who are you to keep it to yourself? You would be the most, greedy person if you didn't share the story of Yusuf to everyone. Right? Allah has given you this knowledge and you keep it to yourself. You're going to be selfish. No. Yusuf alayhi salam, he gave the, and this is the only thing he can do. I mean, this is the only part of the story where he had the upper hand. Imagine, he didn't have support. Nobody knows about his story. Nobody. He is a slave. The lowest of the low in society. If you have somebody who is homeless, and then some, like Microsoft manager or whatnot comes and then, crashes into this homeless person, is it going to be seen in court? Nobody cares about the homeless person. Right? And then this Microsoft person, he can pay off the judges, he can pay off the jury. And he's like, you know what? Like he's nobody. Well, forget him. Who cares? Right? Now, this is an important point. I'm emphasizing this point because we will soon see how Allah protects His servant. Right? Yusuf alayhi salam didn't have anyone. He didn't have a lawyer to look into his case. He didn't have anybody to speak for him in his case. He didn't have family members to go to the news the news channels to say my son was put in prison for no reason. He didn't have anyone at all whatsoever. And the only opening, the only door that he had, he closed it himself. Why? Because the people are more important than him. This is who Yusuf was, alayhi salam. Right? Now, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says, وَلَوْ لَبِثْتُ فِي السِّجْنِ طُولَ لَبِثَ يُوسُفَ لَأَجِبْتَ الدَّاعِي. Our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says, had I stayed in prison the same length and amount of time that Yusuf alayhi salam stayed in prison, I would have answered the call to that person. Meaning, I would have answered the call to which he was called to. So, I skipped ahead a little bit. The king, in the next ayah, the king says, go and summon that person for me. Right? When the wine bearer goes back to the king and explains the dream to him, he says, you're right. Right? Let's get into it. So, ayah number 50. وَقَالَ الْمَلِكُ ائْتُونِي بِهِ فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُ الرَّسُولُ قال ارجع إلى ربك فاسأله ما بال النسوة التي قطعن أيديهن إن ربي كيدهن عليم. The king, so there's a missing portion in the story. Now remember when I said quite early on in the program, I mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He leaves things out in the Quran, He leaves it out for a reason. And if we analyze all the times that Allah leaves certain information out, if we analyze it, truly we'll find that it doesn't benefit us. Whether we know it or not, it doesn't benefit us. Allah sends this last message very concise and very clear. And it's meant, Habibi, it is meant as a final and last message sufficient for us as the last ummah. Right? So it seems like there's something missing. The wine bearer goes back and tells the king the interpretation of the dream. Obviously, it's not from himself. Right? Now, obviously, the wine bearer, he worked for the king prior to him going into jail. Because Yusuf alayhi salam says, you're going to go back to work for your king. Meaning that he was working for the king prior to meeting Yusuf alayhi salam. So the king knows, who he is. Obviously, knowing who he is, he's like, you couldn't possibly come up with this, right? Like, go back and tell the person who informed you of this dream, tell him to come forth. Like, I'm summoning the person that's explaining the dream. He says, "Utuni bihi," bring him to me. فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُ الرَّسُولُ. So, the king sends somebody back, a rasul, a messenger, right, a caller, to bring Yusuf alayhi salam. Now, a messenger is somebody who brings a message. When it says a messenger, usually you're not forcing somebody to accept this message, right? In the case of our Prophet alayhi salam, he is a messenger. He's not forcing Islam down the throats of the people. He's just here as a warner. Yusuf, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all he does is tell you about Islam. It is up to us to accept it or not. His job is just to tell us and inform us and warn us about the Day of Judgment and Islam. It is up to us to accept it as a messenger. So in the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, a messenger was sent. Now, was it the wine bearer again? Was it a different messenger? We're not sure. Because it only mentioned that a messenger was sent. Alright? It is strange that the king did not force Yusuf to come to his presence. He sent a messenger. Yusuf alayhi salam had the ability to reject it or not. Right? قَالَ ارْجِعْ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَاسْأَلْهُ. So Yusuf alayhi salam responds and he says, well, the messenger comes and says, my king summons you. Yusuf alayhi salam says, ارْجِعْ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ. He says, go back to your Lord. Go back to your king. فَاسْأَلْهُ مَا بَالَ النِّسْوَةِ. Ask him. SubhanAllah, think about it. He says, go back and ask your king about what? About the case of the woman who cut their fingers. Inna Rabbi kaydahunna alim. Surely my Lord is fully aware or has full knowledge of their kaydahun, of their plot, of their scheme. My Lord knows. Nobody else knows. Allah knows. Yusuf alayhi salam says, my Lord knows of their... Well, I mean, look at what he's saying. Nobody knows about this situation. Nobody knows about Yusuf alayhi salam being in prison. Except for who? The Aziz and his wife. Right? That's it. Are those two going to speak up for Yusuf and say, you know what? Sorry, we made a mistake. Yusuf alayhi salam has been in prison for no reason. No. If it wasn't for them, nobody else knows about the situation of Yusuf alayhi salam. Except for who? Yusuf alayhi salam says, Inna Rabbi He says, Inna Rabbi kaydahunna alim. Indeed, Allah, my Lord, knows of their situation. So there's a different explanation or a different understanding of what's mentioning here. Yusuf alayhi salam could have meant that my Lord, meaning my owner, right, the Aziz, my Lord knows about their situation, the plan of the woman. Because why? The Aziz is the one who put him in prison. So whether it's Allah, the Lord of, but it can play both roles, right? If he says that Allah knows, he's correct. If he says that my king knows, my Lord, my Rabb, or my, that also sounds true in this case, right? I hope that's clear. Now, this is where I want to stop actually. Our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, I am surprised by the actions of Yusuf alayhi salam. Now, not in the wording, but he says, had I been in prison, the length or the amount of time that Yusuf was in prison, I would have accepted the caller. And who's the caller here? The messenger that was sent by the king. I would have accepted him. I would have said, yeah, take me like this. You know what? If the king himself is calling me out of prison, I wouldn't have to go to the judge and explain my reasoning and go against the queen and go against not the queen, sorry, the wife of the Aziz, right? I wouldn't have to be in a court case. I wouldn't have to be in a hearing, right? If the king is calling me, that's full access, give me the keys. I'm out. I'm free, right? But no, subhanallah. This is who Yusuf was. This is who our prophet was, Yusuf alayhi salam. This is an example that Allah wanted to show us. Allah revealed this surah to our ummah. This story was not known of the ummah of the past except for the Yahud. The blessing in Allah, in the Quran, Allah sent down this example to the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What a blessing. Because in the second ayah, I believe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the third ayah, He says to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, before this, you were not aware of this story. I am telling you the story for the first time. You did not know the story before me telling you. Allah is telling His Prophet, our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Had Allah not revealed the story, we wouldn't have such an amazing story to learn from. Do you understand? This is a blessing in which Allah put in the Quran. And if we don't make a connection, create a relationship with this Quran, surely we are at loss. We're the ones that's lost. We're the ones that are the losers. Right? Our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he is praising Yusuf alayhi salam for doing what he's doing. Twice. Not just once. The first time he could have said, to the wine bearer, he says, no, go back. I have the upper hand here. I have the knowledge. If you want it, do something for me first. That was the first time. Now this is the second time. He says, irja'. He says, go back to your Lord. SubhanAllah, what an amazing character Yusuf alayhi salam is. Go back to your Lord. Not until you ask your Lord to look into the case of the woman who cut their finger. I'm not gonna go. I'm not going to leave this prison. Now, there's a few things to mention here. Yusuf alayhi salam. Yusuf alayhi salam, why is he so adamant with getting his case heard, going through a full hearing, making sure that, you know, a judge is hearing his case, that people are going to hear about this? Why is he going through such length, and why is he sacrificing such such a sacrifice that he is willing to stay in prison for possibly the rest of his life if he doesn't take this opportunity? Why? Now, Yusuf alayhi salam can possibly be the only mu'min, the only person in Misr, in Egypt during that time, to give the call to Allah, to give da'wah to the people. Now we know that, you know, like this, I might be getting into, you know, shallow waters here, but if the government, or if, you know, the an higher entity wanted to discredit a person who is followed by a lot of people, especially like an imam or a sheikh or a scholar, the kuffar, you know, the FBI and the government, they know how to get to these people. What do? They expose the sins of that person. Now, if you're able to say that, you know the scholar that you're following, do you know what he does? Do you know what he does behind closed doors? His sins? If it's exposed to the people, people will lose trust. People will lose respect towards that person. Right? Yusuf alayhi salam, if the case of the Aziza, the wife of the Aziz, or the case of the woman who cut their fingers, if that was attached to his name, possibly, if Yusuf was to give da'wah, people might not respect him. Possibly, they might respect him, but not to the fullest extent. A person's name, a person's reputation, right? That's a really good word. A person's reputation, even though you don't want it, you don't care about it. Like, it's between me and Allah. I don't care about my name. It actually, if you are a da'i, is something important that you should be aware of. You shouldn't. Maybe you might not pay close mind to it. It's just you. You have to be careful with what you do. Now, I was talking to a friend recently who studied in Indonesia. And he was studying with somebody who is currently a judge in Malaysia. That judge in Malaysia, I just heard, that some stories secondhand from my friend. And he says that being a judge, it puts, how would you say it? Your life won't be the same as other people in your life. Why? There is one thing that you have to do where it's a training for yourself where you cannot be biased even with your closest friend. Because most likely, if your friend gets into a situation, it is almost likely that he will end up in your court case. And if you are biased to your friend, and you are more lenient to him than to the opposing side, you as a judge have the responsibility to look at both cases equally. And if you're biased in any way, you better fear Allah with your decision. So, as a judge, I hear that he prays his night prayers every single day. He doesn't miss it. He makes adhkar in the morning, in the night, every single day without missing it. He is aware of Allah in every situation that he gets into, and he is God conscious of Allah. It is a form of training for his heart to be able to fear Allah, so that when he has to come up with a decision that will affect the life of somebody, and will affect the life of their family, and will affect the life of their future, he fears Allah in that decision. So whenever he goes out with a friend to drink tea, it's a different type of, a different type of meeting. If he doesn't go out to public places, like to the mall, for example. There's things that he restricts himself. He restricts himself from going. You won't see him ever in a theme park. You won't ever see him at like an open park with women, and stuff like that, right? You won't ever see him there. Why? Because he has a duty. He has to hold true to that duty, because once his name, his image is if we have a responsibility, and every single person in this masjid has it, if you are carrying the title of a Muslim, you better know that people out there, especially now that we're living in America, are watching us. The slightest mistake, they're gonna be like, "Oh, is that how Muslims are?" They joke. I mean, it's not haram to joke around, but Habibi, shwaya tayyib. If we do something incorrect, right? For example, if we are on the street and we don't turn on our signal, and we like, oh, nobody's watching anyways, right? And we just take a right turn or a left turn without signaling. What will that do if we keep doing something like that? It could be as simple as not signaling. The next thing we know, we're like, Allah. Like, what if I pray late for Fajr? What if I don't pay a penny when I'm buying something? It's just a penny. The cashier, he doesn't recognize it. He doesn't know. He doesn't know. Khalas, I'm leaving. Who cares? Nobody knows. All right. What will that lead to? If you don't do something as simple as flicking a switch, knowing that it's the right thing to do, what if it comes to a point where you have to do something right, and you've trained your heart to disobey, and when it comes to obeying, you're so used to it. Does that make sense? Right? In the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, what can we learn? What can we learn from those three responses that he just mentioned? That even in your speech and your decision and your life, no matter how terrible, like how bad your situation is, who's worse? Who's in a worse situation than Yusuf alayhi salam? Who? He lost his family. He's lived at an early stage of his life as a slave. He's put into prison for no apparent reason. Who's in a position worse than Yusuf alayhi salam? Yet, did he once blame Allah? No. In fact, the complete opposite. It brought him closer to Allah. Being in prison, He says, no, you know what? If I am released from prison, my intentions is to give da'wah. I'm going to continue to give da'wah. But if I am to give da'wah, my name has to be cleared. I'd rather be in prison. Remember he says, السجن أحب إلي مما يدعونني فيه أو إليه. Because if he was to leave prison, and the case between the woman and him is still there, what if he leave prison and those women are like, oh man, he's out of prison now. Let's plan something else. Let's get him back into prison. Right? Do you see his understanding? The intelligence of Yusuf alayhi salam. He knows that those women are still out there. If they leave prison now, something can happen. They might hear of my release. You know what? They can plan something else. If they get me into prison the first time, they can get me into prison again. Oh, so what's the point? Right? So all of these elements, Yusuf alayhi salam could possibly be thinking about. Now, the number one thing that we learn in his decision, in his speech, in his character, is that every single step of the way, he was conscious of his Lord. The entire time. So when somebody is conscious of their Lord during times of hardship, how much more easier would it be if we know Allah and we're living in our homes with lavish beds and cars that brings us 60 miles per hour. Habibi, shwaya. Right? Now I'll end it with that because I believe it's close to the time of Iqamah. I ask Allah that He gives us understanding of the Quran. I ask Allah that He brings us closer to the greatest blessing that He has ever given us. I ask Allah that He brings our children closer to the Quran and have them understand it, because we are living in a time that if they don't understand the Quran, then they are at loss. Our children are being taught and they're growing up in a time where they need the Quran more than ever. Right? And I ask Allah that He forgives us and that He brings us to see Ramadan once in this year. That يُبَلِّغْنَا Ramadan, that He makes us be able to see Ramadan before our time comes. I ask Allah that He benefits us through this class, and if anything that I said that was wrong was from myself and shaitan, and anything that I said that was right was from Allah and His mercy on us and His grace upon us. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.